Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. And today, Heather Haupt. She is the author of a book called Knights in Training. And when we talk about success on this show, as you hear the guests, we always get great ideas how to make our lives and some of the things we do more successful. However, Heather is helping. She is a successful author, but she's helping parents be more successful in parenting. She's helping young men be better young men, and her book is called Knights in Training. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Very exciting, and you are doing such important work helping young men with your book, Knights in Training. So first of all, that's just a great title, Knights in like Knights of the Round Table. So let's tell people about your book.
Yes. Well, I stumbled upon the idea about 6 years ago with my own family. I have 3 boys who, at the time, were 6, 4, and 2. And so we had read some stories about knights, and they were just mesmerized. So they're waging little sword battles all around me, and I'm looking at this going, okay, I want to teach them about chivalry because I want them to understand how to honor and respect the women in their life. And so I started researching, and I was blown away when I discovered that chivalry was so much more than how a man treats a woman. It was an entire code of conduct that really painted the picture of an ideal to aim for. And so it was used to train up young boys in the Middle Ages. In fact, it was originally designed just for the warrior class, and this training was so compelling that pretty soon the entire nobility saw that and said, oh yeah, we want that for our sons, because they saw that it just instilled a sense of vision and purpose, and it really just grounded them with just this charge to live a life of integrity. And so, yeah, as I was reading that, I saw and I said, oh, this is what I want for my sons, because I'm looking out around me and seeing just boys in our culture are struggling, and they're rude and crude, they're disengaging from school and disengaging from life, and that's just not what any of us want for our sons. And so I said, yeah, this is what I want. And so I posted up, I printed off the Code of Chivalry and put it up in my house and called my boys around, and I said, we're going to engage in knight training. And they they were whoops of delight. They were so excited. And so we not only honored their desire for battles, but we really pulled them in and gave them the charge to really be a knight on the inside. That was just something they were really excited to take on.
And just like when you started out talking about a code of conduct, and that's kind of like the military, but also when we think about knights and warriors of all sorts, one of the things comes up, and that is bravery. And I think bravery for you to have 3 boys to begin with and to have your sanity, I think that's awesome. First of all, as a parent, and also you have a 4th child, is that right?
I do. We were blessed with a little girl a few years later.
So how do you keep just the parenting aspect together? Because parenting in itself is such a challenging thing. It brings us such joy, but it is also very challenging. How do you handle the challenges of having 4 children, first of all?
Well, being a parent is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, because you're on all the time. And you love your children more than anything, and so you want to do right by them. And so it's just constantly walking in faith and talking to the Lord about these things. But it's also being intentional and looking for where are the opportunities that we can be intentional to sow into their lives. And so as we started tapping into this idea of night training, it really changed the way my husband and I viewed these parenting years. And we started to get more strategic because we recognized we have this short window to prepare them for a life. And so we want to take advantage of these moments and realize that we have moments tucked into everyday living. So it's not like we have to go look for special lessons. They're there. We just need to have eyes to recognize them and then to jump into those situations and point out, how our children can walk through that successfully. And our boys, they want to succeed in life. And so when we slow down and we say, okay, here, we're walking into this new situation. For instance, we took our kids a few years ago when we moved here to the Dallas Museum of Art. And so I said, okay, here's what it looks like to navigate the art museum. And I laid out sort of the rules and the guidelines, and there was an appreciation for that. Like, we armed them with the ability, the know-how to navigate that successfully. And that's really what we're doing as parents, is stepping in and going, how can we prepare our children to walk out each season of their life, each thing they're walking into? And that's, when we look at night training, that's really what we're doing there, is really preparing them to live life successfully.
And also, this book comes at a great time. As you're saying, some young men are rude and crude, and some of them are so distracted by the electronic gadgets. So it really is a good time for you to bring forth this code of conduct and engage parents and their young men. And also, let's have a word about some of the things that are also influences. We talk about the phone and the electronic distractions, however, but there's also movies that sometimes are not great for our children. Give us a word on that, Heather.
Yeah, I think we need to, as parents, we need to be what I call mindful media consumers. And so looking at the TV we're watching, the shows we're watching, even the commercials, and seeing, what messages are these sending to us as people and to our boys. And especially with boys, I feel like our culture, actually it's both boys and girls, our culture is sending messages of what manhood is like, and they really don't paint a nice picture of fatherhood. They don't paint a nice picture for men in general. And so we look at that and we go, that's not what we want our children to take in over and over and over again. And so we choose to, sometimes we'll watch movies and we'll talk about it, and other times we just say, no, that's not coming into our home, because those aren't the messages we want our children to hear. We want our boys to be excited about growing up to become adults. We want them to have a vision for being fathers someday, and we don't want to squash that before they even have a chance of getting there.
And that's right. And on the cover of the book, there are two young men there, and they look like they're dressed up as knights, complete with swords. And are those your two of your sons?
They are not. My boys were very disappointed they didn't make it on the cover. But that is often what my boys look like. They love to enter into those realms of pretend play and dressing up and really being the hero that they want to be. And there's so much power when we protect our schedules so that they can enter into those imaginary realms in their younger years and really play and work out what does it mean to be the hero.
And that's right. Give us an idea, if you would, as you talked about the code of conduct that are what you put forth in the book. Give us an idea what some of those codes are for these young men that you're training. Yeah,
well, the foundational aspect of the code of chivalry was to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So that was foundational to everything else. Others include obeying those in authority over you, standing against injustice and evil, defending and protecting the weak. So I think those two are the ones that our boys gravitate towards the most because they want to be the hero. Respecting the honor of women, refraining from the giving of offense, so not looking for a fight, learning proper etiquette and manners for different situations, speaking the truth at all times, being generous, persevering, and pursuing excellence. Those are great things to live by. And it really is, as you mentioned those, in fact, as I think about when I grew up, those are some of the early values that we had back then. But somewhere the train went off the track, and I think you know what I mean. It's great to be reeled back in by parents that want to do the right thing for their young men right. and follow the code that's in your book, because really in our culture we've gotten a little off track and maybe a lot off track, and it's great to be reeled back in. Right. A lot of it is it's classic parenting principles that our culture we've shifted away from. And so I feel like there's a lot of people in my generation and even people with kids younger who are struggling and feel like the nice thing to do is to always bail your kids out of situations, to make sure that you're their friend. And we've lost sight of the fact that they need us to be leaders in their lives, and that we need to let them fail so that they can learn how to persevere through it. And those kind of things really get to the heart of addressing the entitlement mentality that we have going on, the fact that kids are adrift, still dependent on parents long into adulthood. And so we need to just sort of go back to the basics. And that's what my book sort of lays out. Here's what it looked like for the knights of old. Here's how it can look like in our families, and why it's so important. And then I end with just practical tips of here's things we can do in our own homes to help our boys succeed in each of these aspects of the Code of Chivalry.
And we are talking with Heather Haupt. She is the author of Knights in Training, 10 Principles for Raising Honorable, Courageous, and Compassionate Boys. Heather, let's tell people your website so they can find out more information on the site.
Yes, you can find me at heatherhaupt.com. That's Haupt, Haupt.com. And yeah, I write about just parenting stuff, some education-related things, and just raising our children well, being intentional in these years of childhood.
And also, just a minute ago, you talked about the importance of faith. Faith is so critical as we walk with the Lord. Tell us your idea and how it just ties to this code that you put forth, and again, how foundational it is, and how people should think about that.
Yeah. Well, the knights of old, they were repeatedly called to recognize that life is a gift and that they're there to live for something more, that there's more to life than just making sure that you're happy. And so that was so foundational to the knights of old, that they were called to serve, to protect, and to defend, and to do so for the Lord. And this helped them recognize that there was something greater than themselves, that there was values that transcended whoever happened to be in charge. And that is really what, throughout history, has given people the gumption and just that inner desire to overthrow tyrannical rulers when they're in place, because they know that there's something inherently wrong about what's happening. And we also see that when there is love for God, there's that belief that there's something outside of themselves, but also recognizing that people are made in the image of God. And so this was a thought that was teased out in the Middle Ages, the whole concept of the Imago Dei, that people are created in the image of God, and they're special, and they are to be cared for and protected. And so once we understand who we are, who God is and who we are, we're able to extend love and care and respect to those around us. And so faith is just so foundational.
It really is in every aspect of our lives and our children. Also, sounds like a great book for people like me that are grandparents to give their children so that they can incorporate the ideas in the code. But also, you're talking about having young men have compassion. What are some of the ways that parents can cultivate this compassion?
Yeah, well, I think we need to recognize that motivating our boys to exhibit compassion is going to look a little differently than motivating our daughters. And so a lot of times girls tend to be a little more empathetic, and so we need to just be more strategic and careful with helping our boys to develop it, so it doesn't always come naturally. But we tap into this when we inspire their imagination. So when we give our kids good stories where there are strong characters who come in and they do the right thing and they step in to defend and protect. And so there's something inside our boys, especially, where they long to be the hero. And so when we tap into that, we really are able to internally motivate them to be on the lookout for situations where they can be the hero. So I would talk to my boys and say, you know what, a knight doesn't wait for someone to come and say, hey, there's a need over here, please help. A knight is always on the lookout going, where can I step in? Where can I help? And so this has helped my boys to develop what I call situational awareness skills. And so we've worked on this over the years, but being on the lookout for what's going on, how are people perceiving things, where should I say something, where should I maybe step back and stop saying something, and really learning how to read different scenarios and then being willing to and ready to step in and save the day for somebody. And so as we do this, we're really tapping into our son's desire to be the hero and their desire to live life with purpose. And so we're letting them know that they can do that not just in that someday season of manhood, but in this everyday season of boyhood that they're experiencing right now.
And the book is Knights in Training by Heather Haupt. Also, Heather, children and boys, especially maybe more, are exposed to sometimes the wrong kind of humor as they grow up. And, of course, that depends on their situation and the people that they are around. Give us a word about the say, discouraging the rougher kind of humor that they're exposed to sometimes.
Yeah, we as parents, it's going to come naturally. Our boys just sort of gravitate towards that, and it starts at a very early age. And so recognizing that, yes, they're going to lean towards that, but that also our role as parents is to civilize them and to help them develop the self-regulation skills to know when to turn that off is really critical. And so I encourage parents to not feed that. The boys are going to pick up on that on their own, but talking about proper places to say things and improper places to say things. And then even like with the books that we give them, we don't want to be feeding them potty humor books and getting them movies that are full of potty humor all the time, because when they don't learn how to turn that off, they're going to walk into situations. We actually sort of handicap them, and they're not able to walk into situations and read it and go, oh, yeah, is it appropriate to say this here, or is it not? And there are very real situations where men have lost jobs because they don't know how to read situations and turn stuff off. And so we can really give our boys a leg up by teaching them appropriate context and when you're allowed to say things, when you're not allowed to say things, and sort of limiting their exposure to that.
And we see it all the time, people as adults, men as adults getting into trouble sometimes when they open their mouth, and they can get in a lot of trouble. But it sounds like as if we're focusing on this as parents, and I like the word you're using, civilizing them, it really is going to be helpful for the rest of their lives. And that's what we do as parents. We're preparing kids. Sometimes we lose track or the job is so tough that we can't grasp the right things to do as parents, because maybe there is an instruction manual, but I didn't use one when I was raising my son. And it's hard to be a parent and to keep them on the right track. So that, again, it is a timely book, Knights in Training. And then also, Heather, let's say you were to choose just one point and they take this point away from your book. What is that one point that is going to be memorable that you would really underline?
Yeah. Sort of what you already touched on, that life is challenging. Being a parent is so challenging, but when we embrace this idea of night training and choosing to view our years of parenthood with purpose, it really can have a transforming effect. And it makes us sort of look at life with fresh eyes and to be strategic. And it has the power to really alter our children's view of childhood. And I think that's what's powerful, is we want to tap in and help them understand that this is their training phase and that we are preparing them to move out constantly into life. And when we can do both of those things, recognize and remember that to be purposeful ourselves and then helping our children sort of come into that understanding, we can really then truly embrace all of the adventure that life has to offer.
And I like the whole concept of the book, like you started out telling us about making it fun because you related it to the knights and it triggered their imagination. So right away you had an easier road to train your young men. And I'm going to just look at a few things as far as some of the chapters that are in the book. As we talked about, love God, that's one of the codes. Obedience is another code. Protect the weak. Respect women. Speak the truth. And I'm just picking a few out there. So important.
Yeah. And giving our kids a vision for that, because no kid really wants to obey. I mean, I don't think that's against human nature. We want to be our own authority. And so helping our children even enter into and recognize that we all live under authority. And that one of the points I make in the book is that in order to lead well, you must first learn how to follow.
Exactly.
And that was a lesson my grandfather gave me. And it's so important for our boys in general, but our boys especially.
In fact, I remember one time as my son, we went to the Air Force Academy. He was thinking about going to the academy, and they did a great presentation, and I won't remember it all, but the very first thing they said, the first year here, they learn how to follow. The second year, they learn how to lead, and I think then the next year, they learn how to be leaders and take that to the next level. But That
Yeah.
is exactly right. Let's as we have about 3 minutes left, give us a word about raising independent boys, say in an age where boys don't really seem to be growing up. I see that all the time.
Yeah. Well, part of it goes back to we feed the imagination. So we need to be giving them good books, good heroes to want to be like, so they have a dream and a vision for their future. And then we also want to build a home and a community culture that values men. And so that's one of the things that we need to remember, is that even if the rest of the culture is saying one thing, we have so much power and influence in our own homes to really honor the men in our life, to point out where fathers are just nailing it, where men are leading well. In fact, I pointed that out to my son. We were at the airport last week, and a gentleman he saw us sort of standing off, and he said, "Hey, are you in line?" And he gave deference to a mother and her son who was at the airport, and I pointed that out to my son later. And so we want to be doing that and creating this culture in our home where there's respect for men, so that our boys want to grow up to be those men worthy of respect. And then we give them real work to do. They need chores. They need hard labor. Things that they are making contributions to the home and starting to develop that work ethic. And then we just need to recognize that with privilege comes, connect privilege with responsibility. As they grow up, they get more privileges, but they also get more responsibility, and that's just part of becoming an adult. And so making sure that those two are in balance, because when we give our kids privileges without responsibility, we're setting them up for failure.
That's right. And back to the airport example you just gave, chivalry. There's a tremendous example of chivalry. And also, Heather, let's tell people you are coming to Houston pretty soon. Let's tell people about that. How can they find out more?
I am. I will be coming to Houston next month in July for the THSC Homeschool Convention. It's going to be in the Woodlands. And so, yeah, I will be speaking specifically. I'll have a whole hour-long workshop on what does it look like to raise sons according to the Knight's Code of Chivalry.
So once again, July in the Woodlands, and we'll try to make sure there's no humidity, which will be impossible, Heather. and because it seemed like it started this morning that it is now sauna bath season until maybe November. But also, people can find out on the website about the event as far as specific times. And again, that website is Heather, HAUP for Paul, T.com. Is that right?
Yes, and I have a speaking page with a link to the convention that I'll be at in July down in the Woodlands.
HeatherHaupt.com. Heather, you're doing such important work. Give us one last word. What else would you like people to know before we end the show?
To know that raising kids is a grand adventure. You're not going to do it perfectly, but our kids are so forgiving. And so when they see that we love them completely, that we're totally on their side, and that we set up high expectations for them, they are really going to thrive. So you have what it takes to help your children succeed.
Indeed. The book is Knights in Training by Heather Haupt. Go to HeatherHaupt, HAUPT.com. See her in the Woodlands and get some parenting tips. I know we all need that, and this book is a tremendous resource that you're providing. Knights in Training. Heather, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Very nice. Ladies and gentlemen, Heather Haupt. Her book is Knights in Training. Check it out. Heather Haupt, HAUPT.com. See her in the Woodlands here in July in Houston, Texas, where it'll be maybe nice and cool, but maybe not. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Successful Living with Bill Nampick, and we'll see you next week.